The night air outside the office building felt heavier than usual, thick with the glow of restaurant lights and the quiet intimacy of couples holding hands on the sidewalk below. Ethan Carter stood by the large glass window on the 23rd floor, his shoulders slumped, his tie loosened, his reflection faintly visible against the city lights. He wasn't supposed to be there that late, but over time had become his silent companion ever since life forced him to grow up faster than he ever imagined. As he stared down at the street, he noticed something that made his chest tighten even more than exhaustion already had. Couples leaning into each other, laughing softly, sharing kisses as if the world had given them permission to be happy. Ethan swallowed hard, because for him, happiness felt like something he used to know, something that belonged to another lifetime. What he didn't realize was that someone else was watching the same scene, standing just a few feet away, and that moment would quietly begin to change everything. Before the story continues, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel if stories like this matter to you. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story belongs to hearts everywhere. Ethan Carter had not planned to become a single father at 32. Life had once looked very different. He had dreams that felt solid, a family that felt permanent, and a future that felt predictable in the best way. Then came the night that rewrote everything. A phone call, a rain-slicked road, and an accident that left him standing in a hospital hallway holding the smallest hand he had ever touched, belonging to his 3-year-old daughter Lily, while the world quietly collapsed around him. From that day forward, Ethan learned how fragile joy could be, and how strong a heart had to become just to survive. Mornings began before sunrise. Ethan would wake to the sound of Lily coughing softly or calling his name, her voice still half asleep. He would make breakfast while packing lunches, iron his shirt with one hand while tying her shoelaces with the other, always racing against time. Childcare costs ate away at his paycheck, medical bills lingered like shadows, and sleep became a luxury he could not afford. Yet every time Lily smiled, missing her front tooth, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, he remembered why he kept going. Work was both his refuge and his burden. Ethan worked as a financial analyst for a large corporate firm, a place of sharp suits, polished smiles, and unspoken competition. His boss, Richard Coleman, was known throughout the company as distant, disciplined, and emotionally unreadable. Richard was a man who commanded respect without asking for it, whose presence could silence a room. To Ethan, Richard represented stability and success, everything that felt out of reach. What Ethan didn't know was that Richard carried his own quiet loneliness, hidden behind tailored jackets and professional authority. That night, when Ethan noticed Richard standing nearby, also gazing out the window at the couples below, he felt a flicker of discomfort. He straightened his posture, ready to apologize for staying late or being in the wrong place. But Richard didn't look annoyed. He looked thoughtful, almost vulnerable, his eyes reflecting the same city lights and something deeper, something aching. Ethan noticed how still Richard was, as if time had paused for him too. Ethan returned to his desk that night with a strange heaviness in his chest. Over the following weeks, subtle changes began to surface. Richard started assigning Ethan to projects that mattered, ones that carried weight and visibility. At first, Ethan assumed it was coincidence or necessity. But then came the unexpected flexibility, the quiet approval for leaving early when Lily was sick, the unspoken understanding when Ethan looked worn down. These were small things, but to Ethan, they felt enormous. Life at home remained demanding. Lily's health required constant attention, and there were nights when Ethan sat on the edge of her bed watching her breathe, afraid of what tomorrow might bring. He carried guilt like a second skin, always wondering if he was doing enough, if he was enough. He rarely spoke about his struggles, because the world had taught him that strength meant silence. One evening, as winter crept into the city and lights began to decorate the streets, Ethan stayed late again, finishing a report. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplified thoughts. Richard passed by, slowed his steps, and lingered. Without words, there was a shared understanding in the stillness. Two men at different points in life, both watching happiness from behind glass. From that night forward, something shifted between them. Richard began mentoring Ethan, not just professionally, but personally, in the subtle ways that matter. He shared stories of missed chances, of a marriage that had ended years ago because ambition had crowded out love. He spoke indirectly, carefully, but Ethan felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. It was the first time since his wife's passing that he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival. Spring arrived, and with it, new challenges. Lily's school expenses increased, and Ethan faced the possibility of taking on additional work. Stress began to show in his health, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders permanently tense. Yet, at work, his efforts were being noticed. A major presentation he led brought unexpected praise from executives. For the first time in years, Ethan felt pride not tinged with fear. One afternoon, Ethan brought Lily to the office during a company family event. She clung to his leg at first, shy and observant, her eyes wide at the towering building. Richard noticed her from across the room. Something in his expression softened as he watched Ethan kneel to Lily's level, his exhaustion melting into gentle patience. It was a moment that revealed more than words ever could. Richard saw not just an employee, but a man carrying love and responsibility far heavier than any briefcase. From that day, opportunities unfolded with careful intention. Ethan received a promotion that came with better hours and a raise that eased the constant pressure. It wasn't charity, and Ethan knew it. It was recognition of resilience, of quiet dedication. Still, the weight of self-doubt lingered. He wondered if happiness was something he was allowed to reach for, or if it was reserved for those couples below the office window. Life doesn't change all at once. It changes in moments. A school recital where Lily sang off-key but beamed with confidence. A morning where Ethan realized he hadn't woken up dreading the day. A quiet dinner where laughter replaced silence. Slowly, the glass wall between Ethan and the life he once watched from afar began to thin. Near the end of summer, Ethan found himself standing by that same window again. Couples still walked below, still kissed under streetlights. But this time, his chest didn't ache the same way. There was warmth there instead, a cautious hope. Richard stood nearby again, older, wiser, carrying his own regrets, but now smiling faintly. Without speaking, there was an understanding that some wounds never disappear, but they can become places where strength grows. Ethan went home that night and held Lily a little tighter. He realized that love hadn't left his life when tragedy struck. It had simply changed shape. It lived in bedtime stories, in packed lunches, in the quiet determination to keep showing up. As this story comes close to its end, if it has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. And before the ending, we ask you from the heart to comment one word that describes how this story made you feel. Years later, Ethan would look back and understand that the moment he thought he was only watching happiness from afar was actually the moment his life began to open again. Not because someone promised him love, but because someone reminded him he deserved it. And sometimes, the most powerful changes begin not with grand gestures, but with quiet understanding, shared humanity, and the courage to believe that even broken lives can become beautiful again.